Hey everyone, today I'll be doing a review on Atelier Lydie and Suelle. So, this game is part of the big Atelier series. Well, they call it Atelier, it's really supposed to be pronounced Atelier, I suppose. But this game is a very long running franchise. Maybe if you counted a franchise by how many games it has been released, this one would be one of the highest, because I'm pretty sure there's over almost 20 games or more within the Atelier series. And basically, Atelier is a game that's been having yearly releases. It's been made by Gust, and now it's being published by Koei Tecmo, who have taken over. It wasn't always owned by them, but this game, the Atelier franchise, it's kind of like Gust's last lifeline. It's like they're pumping out these kinds of games each year just to survive, because they know that they've been trying to experiment with other franchises, making their own IPs, all of that, but it hasn't been going very well for them. And a lot of people have criticized that because, there's over 20 games in that series. Like, why do they keep pumping them out so much? Like, it's like they don't even change that much between each games. But yeah, what I want to talk about mostly is just to do a little review of this new game, Lydie and Suelle. This game, I suppose you can say that in a series as big as Atelier, it's difficult to know how each in the series is connected, and the best way for me to explain the more recent games from the PS3 onwards is to just talk about the three trilogies really briefly. So, the past three games, they're called the Orland, Dusk, and Mysterious trilogy. So that's 9 games over almost 10 years. In the last 10 years, 9 games. It's crazy. But basically, this game, Lydie and Suelle, is part of the most recent trilogy, and as I said before, it's called the Mysterious trilogy. So the first game in the series was called Atelier Sophie, then came Atelier Ferris, and now it's Lydie and Suelle, which is the first game that has two. Well, actually, it's not the first game. It's what I should say. It's one of the few games that has two protagonists. 'Cause, in one of the other trilogies, they also had two protagonists as well. And well, the thing is, a lot of people have been criticizing this game in particular because not all of these games were released when DLC was so abundant, and now people go on the Steam page and they make fun of this game a lot because they're charging a lot for all of this extra DLC. They figured, the only kind of people who are going to buy this game and the DLC are the diehard fans of the series, so they went and pretty much just jacked everything up to buy all the DLC. It's one of those situations where to buy all of the extra DLC for this game, it would cost as much as the game itself. So it's like, if you want all that extra DLC, which is really just costumes and stuff, and in the old days you would have seen that being included in the game for free to begin with. So nowadays it's like, you have to pay twice the price if you're a diehard fan, and it's sad because they could have been able to get more newcomers into the series if it wasn't so off-putting. A lot of the big YouTubers, big reviewers, they criticized this, saying, wow, it's kind of a cash grab. And it makes you wonder who's really running things, ever since Koei Tecmo started micromanaging all of these series. Not just this series, stuff like Dynasty Warrior, for example. Ever since they started getting their hands on all this stuff, it's just been getting so shitty nowadays. That's all there really is to say about it. And I'm sure that this kind of practice is also what they've contributed to. They told Gust and everyone, hey, let's just jack it all up, because we know that only the diehard, really, really interested fans are going to buy this anyways. Might as well jack it all up. Jesus. But in terms of this game, Atelier, Lydie and Suelle, compared to the previous games, it's actually a lot more polished and refined compared to the other games in the series, even within its own trilogy. In Atelier Ferris, it was a very different game because it actually had an open world, and unfortunately that's removed. And the sad thing is that although a lot of people criticize the open world, I kind of liked it in an Atelier game. The thing is, with the open world meme, you know what happens nowadays? The open world meme, it's like everyone wants to do open world because back in the early 2000s, not many people did open world, and the people who did open world, like San Andreas, they were insanely popular. But the problem is that with technological improvements, it's much more easy compared to the old days to implement an open world system in your game. But the problem is with that is that they just end up bloating the game. They end up putting a lot of extra collectibles. They end up putting generic side content, and sometimes, like Mafia 3, for example, in that game, they would require you to complete a whole shitload of optional generic objections of your choice, of course, but you'd have to do a certain amount of them just to progress in the game. So a lot of these modern open world games that are not really Grand Theft Auto, they end up just trying to inflate the playtime. It's not to say that all open world games are shitty. No, some games are really amazing with open world design, like The Witcher 3, for example. In The Witcher 3, everything sounds like, it feels like it was crafted uniquely. It wasn't like it's not a bloated game at all. So, but I was sad because open world would make more sense for an Atelier game, because like these games, they're unique games. They're games where you have to collect things. It just made more sense to me to just explore a world, find a whole bunch of different plants, minerals, all of the different categories of items across like a sprawling open world. I actually really liked how big the environments were in Fierce. Yeah, it might be a little bit annoying if you had to get a particular item and that particular item was really far away, but I argued that, I mean, you just have to plan it out, like, well, I mean, as long as you were able, I found, even, like, the thing is, with me, and I'm in a unique situation, Ferris was actually my first Atelier game, and then I played the games, like, backwards afterwards, and the thing is, I was able to get through Ferris, even though it had a time frame. You had to get reference letters within a certain number of months. It wasn't very strict at all. I was able to easily complete the objectives with a large amount of time remaining, like months worth of time remaining. So I was kind of sad to see that the open world is kind of gone. They still try to make, even though like all the environments in this game, Lydie and Suelle, are closed off, it does kind of, it's not really open world though, because it's not, everything is not connected like how it used to be. But the thing is, they try to make the closed off sections big and unique. So I mean, I'll give them some pros for that. I'm happy about that. But don't mistake it, it's not open world like Ferris was. The sad thing is that they probably used a lot of their budget on making that open world environment. So I guess now you can kind of say that the budget has been more evenly distributed to the other aspects of the game. One thing I like about Lydie and Suelle is that there isn't really a time limit, and I know that there's a lot of criticism about that because the time limit is what makes the game a little bit challenging. It tries to encourage you not to do everything, not to grind so much, this kind of stuff. It was kind of a unique element in the old Atelier games. But now they've removed it, and they kind of removed it in Ferris as well. With Ferris, it's like half the game had a time limit, and then the post game didn't have a time limit, so you could do a lot of the optional stuff after you beat the game when you weren't stressed out. And I like that approach. That was a compromise. And some games just didn't have a time, like really like very lenient time frames in the old games. Like I know in let me think, Suelle, I think it just gives you an extra year just to do the post-game content, because you probably think that's kind of weird. Like, how could you beat the game and a post-game within a time limit? Those kind of time limit situations. If you played more popular things like Dead Rising, you can kind of think of a time limit like that. But these Atelier games, they weren't really that stressful, to be honest, the time limits. Bad time limits were like I think it was Lightning Returns, the third Final Fantasy 13 game. You know how they had 3 pieces to that game? The last game, that had a really strict time limit because you had to do all the quests and everything within that time limit. Stupid things would end up changing the time limit, the time you can only activate certain quests in certain time. Like, that was just frustrating and a piece of shit. But these games, it's not strict like that. So in Lydie and Suelle, yeah, only certain maybe certain side quests can only be done within like day or night, but it's not mean about that because they compensated for it already because there's no time limit, so you can kind of wait until day or night really easily, in contrast to the old games, which the old games didn't really have day or night cycles to deal with, so you didn't have that, but they had more strict deadlines. So the thing is, it's always a compromise, and there is a really short deadline section in this game actually, but it's only for one mission, and it's usually pretty easy to do, so you don't have to worry about time limits in this game at all. So you can actually Like, so especially if you're a newcomer into the series, you can just go and you can collect everything, grind as much as you want, even though it's not helpful in these series. Grind as much as you want, do whatever, and you won't be punished. Like, you can do all of the side content first if you wanted to, but again, you have to progress the story to a certain amount. And one of the nice things about this game is that there's really no missables either, as far as I could tell. You can do both there's main storyline missions and there's character side missions, and they're all unique. They all have unique skits. You can kind of think of the cutscenes in this game like that of a visual novel, so it's like a slice of life anime kind of deal. So you kind of have to enjoy a certain kind of game to enjoy this. With this kind of game, it's it's just like laughing at the characters' antics, watching them interact with each other, just like laughing, have a good time, and just like helping the side quests with their characters. Now there's also generic monster hunting quests as well, so those are just if you want to grind, if you want to get experience defeating unique monsters, or if you want to get extra gold, like the currency in the game, you can just do those generic stuff. But usually the unique character side quests, you don't have to do them to beat the game. And yeah, with these games, one thing I like about the Atelier franchise is that usually there's a lot of endings. Now the thing that sucks is that with this game, there's not that many endings. I think it's only like maybe 4 or 5, and it's not as unique as it used to be. What they actually did was, there's a reason for the low number of endings though. In the old games, you could get like the main like endings, but you could also get character endings. And basically, if you maxed out like a character's affinity, they do it a little bit differently in each game. But if you maxed out a character's affinity in the old games, the game would like end with that character, like with the main character interacting with the side character and just like running away or something silly like that. In this game, instead, they'll actually just have like character endings when you end their side quests, and then you can actually go for the main game ending. So it's don't be discouraged by the number of endings that the game has. It actually does have technically the same amount of endings. It's just it's mixed in with the game itself instead of actually constituting an ending, you know what I mean? So if you're scared about this game like having like fan service, because I know it does kind of look inappropriate, it's really not inappropriate when you play through the games. The games are really fun. It's just about having a nice time, making the best kind of equipment, items that you can, because this is what the game is about. One famous poster in the old days, he posted online saying that in other games, in a regular JRPG, you'd be like a hero grinding and defeating some evil bad guy. But in these Atelier games, it's like you are like the merchant who sells everything to those characters. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that these games don't have a good battle system. These games have good battle systems, and you have to exploit the mechanics of the game. What you need to do is you need to collect ingredients. And in the old games, you had time limits to collect, and you can only collect so much. But in this game, it's not like that. You can collect whatever you want, and you need to just be smart about it and make the best equipment you can using synthesis, using alchemy. And it's just each game in the Atelier franchise will have a different system of making items. And each game you have to kind of learn how to cheese it, and you have to like be smart about it. You transfer traits. So traits are kind of like these bonuses with an item. Certain traits can only go on to certain kinds of equipment. So obviously, with healing items, you can't put destructive properties, like you can't put increased damage by 10% on a healing item. Only certain things are compatible, and you do that to make your characters have the best weapons, armors, and accessories. And yeah, you can do it with other things too. You can make accessories to make you get more gold, to increase the item drop rate from monsters, this kind of stuff. So when you're out in the field collecting ingredients, you can also fight monsters and get ingredients like that too. In the old games, you would have to defeat many bosses to get better and better access to armors. Like you'd have to defeat dragons to get the dragon scale, and you can do this in this game as well. Yeah, lots of optional bosses, and within the character side quests in this title as well, yes, lots of side bosses too. Now it might be a little bit disappointed because see, what they kind of do is in the old games, it's like the main bosses in the old games, they will reuse these as optional bosses. So in this game, you will only really see like maybe 1 or 2 new bosses, and everything else is recycled from the previous games. But it's still fun though. The gameplay is decent, and they've improved upon the mechanics of each game. I wouldn't say it's casualized or anything, but it's very friendly for newcomers. And yeah, like they kind of made it so that, yeah, if you want to grind, it can make it easier. Like, let's say you make a really fancy piece of equipment, And the thing is, you don't want to really like use it up, because then you have to farm the items again. That might be a concern for new players. You don't want to keep farming. What you can actually do is you can register like this item. Let's say you make a really nasty bomb that can kill everything in one hit. You register this at the shop, and what will happen is the shop will make it for you, but you just have to pay it in money. Now, this amount of money you have to pay depends on how, the quality of the item, like how high of a level is it, what traits does it have. But usually it's not so bad. Usually it's cheaper, and it saves you a lot of time. So you might want to just defeat some generic baddies to get the gold, and then use the gold to just replenish your item supply. That's the best idea. But what I was going to say, though, is that, yeah, this game is not nasty or anything at all. Like, some of the scenes are really provocative. I know that in Australia, there's a meme called high impact sexual violence. But that's because of, well, yeah, it's because in the old game, sometimes they would have alcohol and stuff, so that would raise the rating of the game a lot. And in certain jurisdictions, like Australia, they would actually even go as far as to give the game an M rating, I think, or whatever their equivalent is to the ESRB. But these games are not really inappropriate at all. It's not like those really fan service games you would see on Steam. Like, Steam has like the worst of the worst. But I mean, this game, no. It's all about just making good equipment and having fun. It's just fun slice of life interactions between the characters, and you'd laugh at that. The only thing I really don't like about the story, though, the story of the game, I'm not spoiling anything, it gets wrapped up well. It has a conflict, and you end up solving the conflict, and you have a lot of fun character interaction between it. You can do side quests with the other characters and have fun. But the thing is, these games were meant to be played in trilogies, so I told you before that this game is part of the Mysterious Trilogy. But the problem is that, with the trilogy, you'd expect there to be like a overarching kind of plot, but in this game, there really isn't. It's okay though. It's better if you're a newcomer. Even it means that you can get into the game really easily. But aside from maybe a couple of plot points, like there really isn't much that carries over. So I guess that disappointed me a little bit, because I felt like they could have made the trilogy more cohesive. They could have balanced it. They could have made it more connected, and they also could have made it friendly for newcomers as well, by having a balance. But instead, I feel like they really didn't. They didn't really make it much of a trilogy at all. They just call it the same thing, and it has the same characters from those other games in the trilogy, but that's about it. Yeah, I really feel like it could have just been more fun. One thing I also didn't like is that this game, it has another main character, but the problem is that it's the situation where there's like a character, and you see them in all the cutscenes, and they're like a part of your party in your JRPG, but the problem is that they cannot participate in battles. Now that's fine. Now I'll give you an example. If you ever played Tales of the Abyss, there was this one guy called Ion, and he was purposely like non-combative, but like he would tag along most of the game. But you would never, of course, play him because he was just non-combative, and that's what the game tried to do. Like one of those kinds of situations, kind of like a guest. The problem in this game is that this one main character, now not like Lydie or Suelle, I'm talking about someone else. The problem is that they show her fighting, and the problem is that they released her as a DLC character, and that's really like shitty for someone to do. You know what I'm saying? It would have been okay if you just didn't include her at all. But the thing is, it's like you put one of the main characters. One of the characters who's very influential to the story and who clearly has cutscenes of her fighting like the enemies in the game. You put that character behind DLC that you have to pay for. That's really like scummy and shitty. I don't know why they would do that. Maybe eventually they'll release her for free or something, but like that really like peeved me off pretty bad. It's like, you know what I mean? And not just that, with this game in particular, one of the big things that pissed me off is that, yeah, apparently a lot of, like, these characters, and the thing is, the other characters from the other games in the trilogy, they're actually, like, locking them behind DLC. It's just stupid. Like, they're not even, like, making improvements and stuff. It's just, they're just taking the same person from the previous game and putting them in this game. Very, very slight touch-up. And maybe like naming some skills, maybe doing a quick animation. If they're not already reusing it, they just have to make a quick animation of some of the special skills that they use. And you know, they're just doing that and they're just charging more money. That's one of the things I just don't like about the game. That's really kind of scummy. Like, it's not even like you're making a new, well, like, you know, it's not like you're making a new character. One thing that you'll notice if you played a lot of the previous Atelier games is that they pretty much just take the animations and put different models on them. So you'll see a lot of expressions in these games. You'll see the characters' expressions and stuff. You know, it's just like copy and pasted from the old games, except they just put some new clothes and maybe like it just changed the size a little bit, this kind of thing. So it's like, you know, they're just, that's why I call it Gust's lifeline. It's because they keep reusing their assets as much as they can, barely making it look different, changing the mechanics a little bit, just doing a little bit of voice work, adding some new things. But otherwise, it's just mostly recycled, and you know, and they're just selling it off for the full price. And it's not even a discounted game either. Right? It came out like full price, and in Canada, that's a lot of money. Well, if you're a newcomer though, you will be happy to know that like the old games were kind of unforgiving and very strict. These games, especially this game, it's really friendly. You can choose difficulty options. Now it is kind of it does kind of suck because I'm not sure with this game in particular. With the old games, so when they introduced difficulty settings, you actually had to play. It'd be better to play on the more difficult settings because you would actually get experience boost and you would get increased item drop rate. Yeah, you heard that right. So in that sense, I ended up playing this game as hard, like the hardest setting possible, so that I could get lots of experience, lots of gold, and lots of item drops. And yeah, this is kind of like one of the situations where playing a game on the harder difficulty might even be easier than playing the game on the easier difficulty. Like one of those stupid situations, because of the way they programmed it. I mean, yeah, it's good to give extra stuff when you're playing on a harder difficulty, but it's kind of locked behind that. You know, imagine, oh, you get 2 dragon scales instead of 1 if you play on the harder mode. Now you can make so much more, like, of the best equipment. You see what I mean? Like, the soundtrack in the game and in this whole series of Atelier games, they're really amazing. They're really delightful. Like you can see that you can hear it actually. You can hear that a lot of heart went into making the soundtrack. And this is another joke, a running joke that a lot of friends we like to say, is that even though the game is kind of shitty and low budget, I shouldn't call it shitty, but it is a low budget, different kind of game that's not for everyone. Even though it's such a low budget game, it has an amazing soundtrack, you know? It's kind of like, okay, let me take another example. You know the Tales of franchise? Tales of Legendier, one of the most unpopular games in the Tales of franchise. It has an amazing soundtrack. And you know what I mean? Like, it's like this kind of situation. I'm not saying that this game or series is bad or anything, but for like, you know, like my first time listening to these soundtracks, it would always make me feel like crying because of how, you know, beautiful it sounds. It sounds peaceful, it sounds upbeat, it's very positive. It makes you really want to go out and adventure, collect the best items you can, and make them, you know? It's really amazing. You have to give it a listen if you haven't played through the games yet. It's really phenomenally done. One criticism though, kind of going back into like, oh, the pricing schemes and all of that shit, there is no English dub for the game, so that means you'll have to read English subtitles. Again, you see this with a lot of JRPGs. It was probably done because of the strike. The game was made, you know, over last year, and people striked. They couldn't get voice actors, or they didn't want to do like a half-assed job like Dynasty Warriors. So you'll have to read the subtitles. The problem with Atelier games nowadays, though, is that the subtitles are not really well done. What I mean is that when they translate the game into English, it's not good. They actually outsource it, and what they do is it gets machine translated. You know, kind of like Google Translate. They do that, and then they revise it to save time. What ends up happening is that the game has a lot more errors compared to older games where the translation to English was actually done in-house. Now they outsource it for cheaper money, and you'll actually notice as you go through the series, if you were to play the series in chronological order from the oldest to the newest, as you play through the games, you'll actually see more and more typos and stupid grammar mistakes, all of that. It's just stupid how they did it. The nice thing is that it's completely voiced in Japanese. Like, if you played the old games, maybe you'd only get the important scenes be voiced in English, because English voice actors, they want to be special, they want to make more money, unlike the Japanese voice actors who will pretty much do the whole game for cheap. English people like, oh, look at me, I'm fancy, I'm unionized, piece of shit. But the whole game is, at least it has the Japanese audio, so that's a positive. It always sounds funny when you listen to the Japanese audio because they'll always make strange sounds, but it's funny. Sometimes it's actually really amazing to see how much range their voices have. These Japanese voice actors, they have amazing range. Unlike the unionized voice actors in the West, who will only pretend to do a little scream and stuff, pretend to sob a little bit, these Japanese voice actors are really amazing. They'll actually scream at the top of their lungs. And in the West, if someone made them do that, they just sue, It's stupid here. But over there, I listen to this, and, I don't want to, listen to anything dubbed anymore. Only things I listen to dubbed is, old school stuff from the old days I ever watch. Nowadays, I just watch everything with subtitles, and I don't. Of course, I can't criticize the voice acting. I can't say if it's good or not because I don't speak their language. But goddamn, this will sound amazing. So I think in the end, you need to know what you're getting yourself into when you play these games. If you think you'll be a fan of slice of life kind of games, you see what I'm saying, slice of life anime kind of games where it may not be taken too seriously, in a game where you have to challenge yourself instead of defeating a big bad person. You won't really get any major antagonists in this game. Yeah, you'll see some antagonists, but a lot of it's more done in a joking kind of way. You kind of have to know what you're getting yourself into, and if you do think you would like this game, then by all means, yeah, but you just have to know what you're getting yourself into. If you're a previous fan of the Atelier series, I think you would enjoy this game because Atelier Ferris, the last game that came out, it was a little bit disappointed, and I think that was so because they spent too much money allocation to the open world aspect. But in this game, no, they actually made a genuine effort to improve the game. It's kind of like how Tales of Zestiria and then Tales of Berseria came out. Zestiria was a mess, but Berseria was actually a really good game where they actually tried their best to deal with a bad situation and improve upon the game. These two games, Atelier Ferris and Atelier Lydie and Suelle, is kind of analogous to that Tales of example. They really did try to make the game better. It actually is a lot better. Not perfect, it still has faults, The game is glitchy. As I said before, the subtitles has lots of mistakes. And I noticed that I often have to hack the game to get the events going because the events have problems triggering. So even though there's no time limit, the gameplay is very lax. Even though I had the requirements for certain events to pop up, they were having trouble popping up. I'd have to, you can choose to have your character waste time by sleeping. So I would have my character sleeping for months on end, and these events would have so much trouble triggering. Unlike the old games where if you met the requirements, it would trigger immediately, and I don't know why that happened. I think it's because I played the game upon release, and yeah, the game was very glitchy upon release, so I think that if you went to play the game now, it'd definitely be a lot better than playing it upon release. Because I'm making this review a couple of months after the game came out. So otherwise, whether you're an old fan of the Atelier series or even a newcomer, I'm telling you, you shouldn't be put off by the looks of the game. It's really fun. One of the most fun games I have. And the thing is, I like how unique the game is. It's the only game in its genre, to be honest. You don't see this kind of game on a console. As I'm telling you, it's a game where emphasis is put on item creation and improving items, improving equipment. You don't see games with that much emphasis. Usually it's an afterthought. I know in Star Ocean you can min-max your equipment as well by doing something similar with item creation. But never have I seen it so much in the actual main game. That's what the whole game is made for. It's just so unique. It's kind of like one of the genres that died out. And if you look in the old Atelier games, because I told you 20 games, if you look at the oldest games, they pretty much made these item crafting systems that a lot of games now use nowadays. Now they copy off of it, but this was the franchise that made it all back then. Can you believe that? It's really amazing. So yeah, whether you're newcomer, oldcomer of the game, I think that overall they did try their best to make improvements. Overall, they did try their best to deal with the situation. I don't like the DLC. I don't like only having a dub. And I do think that upon release, they charged full price for the game, knowing that only mostly the diehard fans would buy the game. So yeah, it did piss me off a lot, but otherwise, maybe wait for the game to become cheaper, rent it, this kind of stuff, borrow it from a friend maybe. But I think that, yeah, it's a good game in the series. Overall, I would rate it positively. I think it is a game that you should get. It's really fun, especially if you like, anime culture, that kind of stuff. If you enjoyed watching the content in this video, please consider giving it a like. Also, please consider subscribing to our channel so that you can be the first to receive all of our latest content.